Welcome to Bonnie's Beat. My name is Bonnie Squires. I'm your host, and we're coming to you from Radnor Studio 21 in beautiful downtown Wayne. And we'd like to inform everybody about what's going on in the worlds of politics, education, charities, society, a lot of interesting things, interesting people. And we have, as usual, a very interesting guest today. Our guest is Nancy Baron-Baer, who is the Associate Executive Director of the Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, as we fondly call it. Hi, Nancy.
Hello, Bonnie.
Thank you for coming to the studio.
Thank you for having me today.
And we're going to talk about a lot of things, but we're going to alert people that one of the things that we definitely want to talk about is the voter photo ID bill, right?
New law in Pennsylvania as of March of this year, and effective for the election in November. Absolutely.
And there have been so many criticisms about that bill. Can't begin to tell you. Well, you know, of course. And the ADL is working with a number of other agencies to try to get this overturned. Is that correct?
Well, we're kind of working on this bill on two fronts, Bonnie. First, as an advocacy agency, as a civil rights organization that's been around for 100 years now. Come the fall,
That's
we'll be
right.
celebrating our centennial. We believe strongly in voter rights, have for over 50 years, have worked on the Voter Rights Act of 1965, the renewals, and from state to state. So this is an issue that we care about. But in addition, we're part of something a little bit different. We're part of a coalition of over 100 organizations around the Philadelphia region of all varieties, different nationalities.
Oh, religions, too.
Religions,
Yes.
races, all kinds of backgrounds that came together not to oppose the law, although a number of the individual organizations do, but while the law is law, we have to educate the voters so they know what to do.
Exactly. I think we should tell people, first of all, it is 100 years old. We're starting the 100th anniversary Centennial celebration this fall. We'll run through next year with the headquarters for the Southeast Pennsylvania and New Jersey region. I think
And
we're
Delaware,
and Delaware
Can't
also.
leave Delaware out.
And we're also South Jersey.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Starting in the fall, and it'll run through next year. The national headquarters is located in New York City, in Manhattan, and people probably know the name Abe Foxman because they see his op-eds all the time in New York Times, Washington Post, and so on. And they know the name Barry Morrison, who's the executive director of the Southeastern Pennsylvania chapter.
For many years.
Many years. I'm a board member. I have to be honest and say that. I'm on the board. And we celebrated Barry's 25th anniversary last year.
No, he's over 30. 30 years with
Oh,
the
my
agency.
good, 30 years. I've lost track. Anyway, it's his lifelong career. He's amazing. Well, how long have you been with ADL, Nancy?
Just celebrated my 10th year.
Wow.
First decade.
Nancy was an attorney for how long?
Oh, very long time. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I concentrated in commercial real estate and law firm management for many years.
And then she switched careers and decided to be a do-gooder all the time and joined ADL. Where did you go to college, Nancy? I never asked you that before.
I grew up in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, then went to the other end of the coast, of the state rather, University of Pittsburgh, and then got my law degree at University of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania all the way through.
You covered, you covered a lot of territory between Pitt and Penn. That's interesting. I won't ask you which you like better because both my degrees are from Penn, so you know where my heart belongs.
We'll leave that one alone.
We'll leave that one alone. Okay.
Love them both.
Now, what are some of the main missions of the ADL? What are the fights that they fight all the time?
So when we were founded 100 years ago, there was a mission statement, and the mission statement was to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment for everyone. And that's how something like voter rights would come into the picture. Fair treatment, equal protection for everyone. And so through the years, we've advocated on behalf of every single kind of individual, regardless of their race, their religion, their creed. We get calls in our office on a daily basis. One day it might be, unfortunately, because there's a swastika appearing somewhere. The next day, maybe it's a Muslim individual who feels they've been discriminated against. We run the gamut.
I have to say, one of the things that made me most proud of the ADL was right after 9/11, when there was this horrible spate of anti-Arab, anti-Muslim activities, actions, horrible things were going on, and even going on college campuses. And the ADL stepped to the plate and spoke out against that kind of discrimination and ignorance and prejudice. That's what they do best, really.
And we assisted a Muslim woman who brought the first action after 9/11 under the federal hate crimes statute. And we helped her. We were there with her. We helped her every step of the way. And people sometimes don't know that we do such a wide variety. The other thing we do that I think probably a lot of people in Montgomery and Delaware counties might know is our educational efforts. So not just civil rights issues, but educational efforts on things like bullying and cyberbullying. Our No Place for Hate project and program that's in many schools around the region.
I know Radnor High School is a member, Lower Merion High School is a member. There's so many schools that have joined this No Place for Hate, which is wonderful.
Over 200.
Over 200 now. Wow, this is incredible. And it's very unique in that each school that joins and signs the pledge, No Place for Hate, they have to design their own program.
Correct.
And some of them will do a multicultural lunchroom, like once a month, so that the kids have to mix and match and learn something about each other's culture.
Right, right.
But they do all kinds of projects and posters and
speakers, and it can be rap sessions and plays
and music.
Everything, everything. And it's really designed, it's an umbrella so that they can do what's most important for their school, what their school needs to help bring about more diversity and better understanding of other cultures.
There's another program that the ADL does, which is fabulous. They have like a summer seminar for Catholic teachers in parochial schools.
This week.
And I have been to that, and it's so impressive. First of all, the teachers are so open. They want to learn about the Holocaust. They want to learn how to teach the Holocaust in the parochial schools, which is a terrific thing, Yet people don't realize that, kids that are going through the school today, what do they know about World War II? They don't know much. They might have seen Schindler's List on television, but that's about all that they know, right?
Oftentimes, when you're studying history in school, you don't get that far. You're stopping at the Civil War sometimes, so sometimes you don't even make it. But this program is fascinating because it's co-sponsored. We do this together with the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. We couldn't do it on our own. It's important to have the support and the backing of the church, and they believe it's important, and they've been wonderful partners.
And for many, many years, there was a wonderful nun from the Archdiocese of Philadelphia who was very active in the Soviet Jewry movement. She was absolutely fabulous. So there have been a lot of instances through the decades of Jewish-Catholic cooperation. I know at St. Joseph's University, they have a whole, Catholic-Jewish dialogue that goes on with all kinds of speakers and courses and so on.
With Phil Cunningham.
Been to some of those as well. And it's just, it's phenomenal. It's very important, too, that people mix and match. I do that every day in my personal life because of whom I'm married to, but anyway. But let's go back to the voter photo ID bill. I'm not as objective as Nancy is. I think that's such a terrible bill. There have been two articles recently that really shine the spotlight on the problems, and Nancy has a lot of stories too. One of them was in the Philadelphia Inquirer, where there's a 70-year-old woman who spent 32 years as a special education teacher in New York City with a driver's license, with a harness racing license, etc. She was a freelance writer for newspapers in New York and Wilkes-Barre. Look at that. And she has a problem. She's been married twice and divorced twice. So the name on her birth certificate is different from the name she's been using for the last 30 years. And this is the greatest. I love this. In order to get the photo ID to vote in Pennsylvania, she would have to document her name changes, which means she has to dig up a 50-year-old marriage certificate from North Carolina and a 46-year-old divorce decree from Mexico. Now, give me a break. How is she going to, I mean, she spoke to everybody up and down the line. She got a copy of her birth certificate, I think, from New York, but she had a passport. She has a current passport. She has a current New York driver's license, and Pennsylvania said she couldn't vote because she didn't have all of these documents. So when the Inquirer started to write about her, suddenly PennDOT had a change of heart. Oy vey. And in the ARP magazine, which is a national magazine, okay, they found...
Now, how would you get that?
I don't know, because you have to be at least 50,
that's right.
at least 50 to get it, and they must have made a mistake. But I happened to open it, and I saw the picture of a 93-year-old Philadelphia woman, Vivian Applewhite.
She's the lead plaintiff in the case.
She's the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit challenging the law in Pennsylvania. Now, she's in a wheelchair. She has voted for like 75 years, but she doesn't have a driver's license. And in order to get the photo ID, she would need her Social Security card, which was stolen when her pocketbook was stolen some time ago. And she'd have, and her birth certificate. She'd have to make a trip in her wheelchair to the Social Security office. Now, if you don't think that that's a problem for a 93-year-old woman who doesn't drive, doesn't have a driver's license, I mean, now you've got some other tales of woe. Tell me your tales of woe.
So I can tell you personally,
yes,
even, but there are also some Delaware County ones. I have two parents. My husband has two parents. They have voted. They are all 90 or almost 90, and they have voted since they were 21. 3 of 4 of them no longer drive. Therefore, they have an expired driver's license, and they can't travel anymore, so they have an expired passport. Unless someone takes them to PennDOT and does all of this work, which at their age is not so easy, they will not be voting for the first time.
Oh, that's really criminal.
So that's a personal story,
yes.
But there's also a gentleman.
And also, when you get to the PennDOT, someone was telling me today, when I brought this topic up and told them I would be interviewing you, they said, you have to wait in long lines, and if you have to go to the bathroom, you lose your place in line, you have to get to the back of the line again. I mean, I've heard horror stories about PennDOT offices.
Well, I just want your listeners to realize also it's not all PennDOT offices that people can go to. It's only the licensing centers. So someone may actually go to where they think it's fine and have it not be workable. I went on the website and looked for Delaware County, for instance, and I believe there's only one place you can go, and that's Media, which for some people is quite far.
That's a schlep, as we say.
That's it could be a half an hour from here.
Right.
So it's a long ride for someone who's elderly, etc. There was another gentleman, there was an article in the paper about from Delaware County, I think it was in the Delaware County Times. His name is Humphreys. He's in his early 50s, and he no longer drives. And he had a photo ID, actually. He's a person who had a photo ID, but it expired, and so he needed a new one. So he sent away for a new one after the law was passed. It's now 3 months later, and he is just, I believe he just got it after any number of attempts to get it and after having the wrong form sent to him, etc. So he finally, I believe, is getting it. But what that says for the rest of the population November 6th is election day. We don't have much more than 3 months. And the last statistic I read said that only less than 2,500 photo IDs have been given out. And there are almost 760,000 people.
758,000
right.
Pennsylvanians do not have photo ID. 758,000. Excuse me. No wonder Mike Terze in the state legislature said this bill will guarantee that Romney wins Pennsylvania. That was not a nice
Check
thing
off
to
the
say.
list, he said.
Yes, it was not a nice thing to say. And so now what is this coalition of 100 organizations doing to try to help people get around this law?
So it's not how to get around the law. It's truthfully,
Excuse me, navigate.
it's how to abide by the law, because otherwise come November 6th, they'll get to the polls and there'll be trouble. So we are doing everything from training people to be presenters so they can go to senior centers and talk to the seniors, so that they can train people in large apartment buildings, places where there are lots of people, so that they can train poll workers on what to ask for and look for. And what if the poll workers aren't educated that day?
The problem is also because some poll workers mistakenly demanded photo IDs for the spring primary. And even when they recognized someone who was their next door neighbor that they know has voted forever, they were challenging them and saying, where's your photo ID? That's crazy. Doesn't make any sense. There are going to be a lot of examples of that. And the other problem is, if you're challenged, you're still allowed to vote, but it's like a provisional ballot.
Correct.
And then you never find out whether it counted or not.
No, but when you do that, there are certain proofs and things you'll have to come up with within 6 days and make sure you can fax it, you can email it, but you're right, I'm not sure how you'll know about its receipt.
And you don't know if your vote was really counted or not, which is a big problem. I mean, I was a committee woman for so many years, and there were enough problems without creating a whole new layer of requirements. And the other problem is, and I believe that the governor thought that there was a problem with voter fraud. But when you look at the statistics, you find out it was infinitesimal. There were so few examples of voter fraud in the history of Pennsylvania that to disenfranchise 758,000 people because there may have been a dozen cases, in the past 20 years, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, there are some things we should be focusing on that are true problems. This is not one of them. And the other thing that nobody's talked about so far, and I know because I have a number of clients that deal with intellectually disabled people, and they're allowed to vote. They have rights like every other citizen, but some of them live in group homes, some of them don't have any family left. How are they supposed to get all the requirements in order to have a photo ID to go vote? It's really a problem.
Their group home, hopefully, or volunteers.
Well,
there are going to be volunteers. The coalition has a center opening on Cheltenham Avenue, and there will be people who will volunteer to take people to PennDOT and work with them through the system. I might also tell the people who are watching, there is a number to call if you have questions. It's 1-866-OUR-VOTE if you have questions, and people can help you.
Oh, I like that. 1-866-OUR-VOTE.
Our vote.
Okay. Well, they could also call the ADL. We'll put that information up on the screen so people can see what number to call for the ADL. The number is 215, I forget what it is, Nancy. It's
568.
Here it is, 568-2223. 215-568-2223 is the Anti-Defamation League, and they can call there to get some information also. We
will most likely direct them through the coalition.
Right.
The other thing people can do is online by going to www.70.org. There are frequently asked questions, a handbook on all of the different categories for instance, that people might, if you're a senior, look at this. If you're a student, do you know that in Pennsylvania they had Penn Perg did a study of 110 colleges and universities. 90 of them did not have the proper photo ID to enable the students to vote in November. 90 out of
110.
They're changing that because just so I can tell people, for a student, you need to have a photo ID from your university. If you have a license, that's fine too, but your photo ID will work if it has an expiration date, and many of the photo IDs had no expiration date. So they're going to sticker them and put on expiration dates for the students.
And we hope that the sticker's accepted.
Well,
you have to train.
Should be.
Right, you have to train. And the thing people don't understand, really the poll workers are just volunteers.
Correct.
And a lot of the time they're not even paid anything for the day. And if they're paid bupkis, you know, and they have to be at the polling place at 6:30 in the morning to open up, and they can't leave. The poll closes at 8 p.m., but then they have to stay and they have to do the count. And they have to fill out all the forms.
It's a
and they have
long
to
day.
And they have to wait till somebody, you know, comes to pick up the forms from them. So it's a very long day, and you really have to be a dedicated volunteer in order to work at the polls. So
you need to be an educated one now.
Yes.
When I voted in April, I knew that you did not need ID.
Right.
And they asked me for ID, and I said, I'm not presenting my ID at this election. And the gentleman who worked for, you know, behind the desk at the polls said, we really need this law because of all the immigrants in New Mexico. He thought it was a federal law, which shows that there's a lot of education. And I had to explain to him that New Mexico has nothing to do. We're Pennsylvania.
Right.
And we don't have a history of, or any proof of, any kind of voter fraud.
We don't have Mexicans coming over the New Jersey border into Pennsylvania, I don't think. And, you know, there are some nonsensical rationalizations that are going on to defend this bill. And it's a shame because, you know, some of the people in the Corbett administration, one is from a neighboring county, Chester County. I love her personally, and I know she's carrying water for the governor, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to say we're going to stamp out voter fraud. A friend was telling me earlier today that we won't say which party it was, but it wasn't my party. It was the other party. The guy lived in New Jersey, even though he was the committee man for South Philadelphia, and he owned a property there, and she said 12 dead people used to vote in every election from that house. So that's an example of voter fraud. But that's one example, you know.
Well, the Republican Party, according to Terry Madonna, who's a famous political scientist from our state, a Republican advocacy group did a study and found over a decade, so that's 10 years, 400 cases throughout the United States of voter fraud.
And
if you divide it up, you divide that up, it's less than one case per state per year.
Oh my goodness. Wow, that's a very shocking statistic, Nancy. Shocking but encouraging. When will this lawsuit be argued in court? Do you have any idea?
Week. The suit begins next week, and
well, this will be airing on Monday, July 17th, 23rd.
I believe it's the 25th.
Okay.
And the woman you described, Mrs. Applewhite, is the lead plaintiff.
Does she have to appear in court?
I'm sure they're going to love to have her be a witness.
They'll wheel her in.
And there are a number of other...
Because I understand she's very smart and very sharp at 93, that she's just amazing.
There are a number of individual plaintiffs, some like her, some because they never had a driver's license, some because one woman can't get, her name is different, and because her only proof of marriage was something written in Hebrew because she's elderly, no one at PennDOT could understand the language, and they couldn't.
Oh, you bring up language. That's very interesting because there are so many people for whom English is not their first language, or it's not a language for them at all because they're at home and they speak whatever language it is from whatever country they came from. And to get them to, I mean, this is tough for anybody to understand this, you know, this piece. I don't even know where I picked up this piece of paper. I must have picked it up at the polls in the spring.
I'll bet.
That says photo ID required for November 2012 election. Obviously, your guy didn't read it because he demanded, you know, for April, he demanded it. It's not, all voters will be required to show a photo ID before voting at a polling place. Now, there are going to be so many fistfights when people have stood in line to get up to the front to vote because it's a presidential election. It's a senatorial election. It's a congressional election. I mean, there are a lot of big, you know, seats that are up because it's Obama, Romney, it's Casey, and I forget the name of the guy who's running against him. He's a Tea Partier. I can't remember his name. I guess I must have blocked that out. And there were a whole bunch of Congress people are running for re-election. And so people tend to come out. There are a lot of people that don't realize they haven't voted in 4 years. They voted the last time they voted for president. And they show up again. And if they're going to be turned away, they're going to be livid. There are going to be a lot of shouting matches. I hope there won't be any punches thrown. But I wouldn't put it past some people who are really passionate and come to vote, and especially if so many people are going to be blocked from voting.
Well, I think part of the lawsuit maintains that, I mean, part of it talks about the disproportionate effect that it will have on certain populations, like seniors, like students, like Puerto Ricans, like African Americans, the
like
poor.
Philadelphians.
Poor, Philadelphians.
Especially Philadelphians.
Well, today's paper said 25% of voters over 80 in Philadelphia, they don't have it. 25%, a quarter of the voters. But in addition, it's the issue of what happens when you go. Maybe you don't have 3 hours to wait in line.
Right.
You know, each poll worker, especially in the beginning, is going to have to spend a considerable amount of time. It's not just a sign-in anymore. They have to check what you have, make sure it matches, you know, look at the photo, look at you. It will add to the length of time.
The lines will be backed up down the street and around the corner. That's what's going to happen. And they better honor the fact that anybody who's in line to vote before 8 p.m., if it's 1 minute before 8, they can't close the doors or close the polling place until every last person has voted. I wonder what that's going to look like on November 6th.
It will be dark by then. That I can tell you.
Let's just hope it's not raining and these people are hanging out the door in the pouring rain or snow or whatever. Anyway, what can people do to help push along this decision to overturn this?
Well, two different paths.
Okay.
One is to make sure, in case the decision is not overturned,
In case it stands.
they need to look at what they are supposed to take with them to the polls now. If they wait until after Labor Day, if they wait until October, it will be too late. And that's part of the warning and the efforts that this coalition is trying to make sure that people start preparing now. So you need to check, do you have a driver's license that is either not expired or is expired less than 12 months?
Oh, less than 12 months.
If you have that,
okay,
then you're okay. Do you have a photo ID by PennDOT? Same thing, less than 12 months.
Well, I like this. If you do not have a photo ID or are indigent and unable to obtain one without payment of a fee, you may cast a provisional ballot and will have 6 days, as you said, to provide your photo ID and or an affirmation to your county elections office to have your ballot count. Well, 6 days is not very long, and we could talk to Nancy all day. Thank you so much, Nancy, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you for having me.